the organ systems can't keep up when the kidneys don't do their job. This is a very consistent story of everybody benefits if you use this system. If you want to bend the cost curve in US healthcare, this is a major lever that could be applied. That's really the exciting part.
Welcome back to another episode of the GS MedTech podcast, where I speak with industry leaders shaping the future of MedTech. I'm Dame Medarski, and today we're focusing on a breakthrough area in renal protection, where technology is finally catching up to one of humans' most sophisticated organs. My guest today is John Erbey, CEO at Roivios, a company pioneering new approach to safeguarding or enhancing the kidney function during time of acute stress. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Dame, thanks for the opportunity. I'm flattered that I'm considered a leader in this space.
Well, I think, obviously we know each other for a while, maybe a little bit over 2 years. We met at LSI in Portugal, I believe, a couple of years back. But and I've been following Roivios, and I'm well impressed by everything that you're doing. But maybe to start, you can tell us who's John Erbey.
Well, the short answer to that question is my father. But in all seriousness, I am what the Working Genius framework would call a creative dreamer. So wonder and innovation are what fills my bucket. And in that regard, it fits that I've gotten to where I am because I like to think about the big problems and how to make the biggest impact with the least amount of effort. You know, that's sort of what drives me. I like connecting pieces of the puzzle that nobody thought were of the same image. And that's who I am.
And obviously in your background and experience, you've worked with some bigger companies before you actually started founding your own businesses as well.
Absolutely. So St. Jude Medical was the smallest company that I worked for before I started my own. So 16,000 employees all the way up to close to 100,000 with some of the big pharma companies that I worked for. Great training, to be honest, seeing how different organizations address process and innovation. You learn a lot from what works and we'll learn a lot from what doesn't work, and hopefully add to the mix as you go along.
Amazing. Thinking about Roivios and the company that you're running at the moment, what inspired you to start the business, and when did you realize actually this is a problem I want to solve?
So believe it or not, the aha moment of, okay, there has to be a better way. I was launching CardioMEMS for St. Jude Medical. So I came to the go-to-market strategy for that franchise. And we were talking with the nephrologists at Ohio State while we were getting ready to meet with the heart failure team. And they were asking us if we could use the technology to manage fluid volume for dialysis sessions. So think about it. You have this 5-figure sensor to measure pulmonary artery pressure, and they're using that because there is no better way to manage how much do I need to pull off, how much do I need to put back in. That really was the moment that, yes, the kidneys need a lot more.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, obviously, your personal and professional journey led to you thinking about developing a device that's focusing on protecting the kidneys during cardiac surgery. So how much that has been influenced by your own expertise and knowledge of the market?
Yes, so dialysis is that black hole that's been, the focus of almost every role of my career. As I was a diabetes epidemiologist early on, went to the Avandia team, which is a diabetes drug, and it was either the end of the road for the patients that we were studying, or it was the event you wanted to avoid, or the patients you wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
Nobody ever actually was trying to work on a solution to prevent that from happening. It's changed. There's a lot of activity in that space. But ironically, dialysis was like the big problem. And the more you dig into it, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The CKD3/4 population are so much larger and have so many more. The breadth of healthcare problem is significantly bigger for that group than it is for the deep-seated problems that are associated with dialysis.
And majority of my audience and network would be MedTech professionals and investors that maybe understand a little bit about the MedTech space. But in simple terms, can you please explain for the wider audience, let's put it this way, the clinical problem you're trying to solve, and why actually are kidneys so vulnerable during cardiac surgery?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces to this. Let me start with our vision is if you keep the kidney alive, the patient can thrive. Kidney disease is one of those rare instances where there's truly a linear relationship between function and cost. So as kidney function declines, that inverse relationship is very pronounced. Patients going from CKD 1 and 2 largely undiagnosed, they double their cost as they go to CKD 3. They double their cost again as they go to CKD 4. They double their cost again as they go to CKD 5. So that's the magnitude of what we're talking about, is that, at the end of the day, you can have kidney disease that is not pronounced enough to generate a diagnosis, but literally kills you, because it starts that domino of other problems that the kidney is supposed to be managing the internal environment for and can't. So cardiac arrhythmias, you've got brain function, lung function, gut function. All of that is predicated on having an internal environment that's stable. That's the kidney's job. And so when you see these numbers of like the cost doubling it makes sense. The organ systems can't keep up when the kidneys don't do their job. And so our goal is to try to sustain or enhance function. Obviously, we're starting with a very well-defined population. It's probably the smallest market we'll go into, but it's the biggest opportunity from a changing the unmet need. Patients with renal impairment undergoing a cardiac surgery have terrible outcomes. Their kidneys can't survive that stress of the trauma of surgery, the heart-lung machine. All of that leads to slower recovery, higher labor to just watch them almost. And, ultimately their mortality rate is, 8%. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to undergo a surgery where I had an 8% chance of dying. That's not a very good odd. I'll bet so that, that some people may want to take that challenge, but I don't see the upside there. So there has to be something better, and that's really where we're trying to fit.
So it's always amazing to me, and obviously I'm fortunate enough to be speaking with a lot of founders and innovators, and it's always amazing to me. You have this idea, and obviously you've had it while at St. Jude as well, in terms of what you would like to do. But how do you then go from the idea to validating that this is a meaningful unmet need for surgeons, for hospitals, and ultimately for the patients as well?
So there's two things there that really were the way we approached that initial question of, is this a crazy idea? Yes. But one, we did the killer experiment. Can we actually do what we say we think is needed to be done? And then does that do anything? So animal work with kludgy prototypes in the early days, and those moments of, okay, we're going to turn this on. Is it going to do anything or not? And, am I going to be looking for a job in 24 hours, or are we going to be popping the champagne? And then once you get those results, you got to talk to the customer. It doesn't matter whether I think it's a good idea or not. At the end of the day, the way the healthcare is set up, the physicians need to see a benefit of implementing this. And for us, it's not the technology that's sophisticated. For us, it's how to implement it within the system that's going to be the path to success.
Yeah. And what makes this, or the approach that you're obviously working on, fundamentally different from current strategies for managing perioperative kidney care?
So we've talked for a couple of years. This really was a Copernican moment. Like, at the end of the day, we thought about the kidney from a 180-degree different perspective than conventional wisdom. There are a lot of technologies that are trying to push more blood into the kidney to get it to function better. There's this pesky thing called autoregulation that the kidney's fighting you. It's like Chinese handcuffs. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you can push all you want. The kidney's not going to let you do what you want to do with it. There's no autoregulation on the other end of it. So on the collecting system side, you can alter the force and the kidney's not fighting you. So, so kidney at its fundamental structure, it starts with filtration. It's not just a filter, but it is a filter. And to filter, you need to have a higher pressure on the top than the bottom. And so instead of just raising the top, we decided to lower the bottom. And that has so it's simple physics. It's Pascal's law, but that has opened up an opportunity for us to be first movers, take advantage from an IP standpoint because no one else had thought of it. And
so I'm assuming that's your biggest technical or scientific challenge that you've actually.
And it's really not a technical challenge. I mean, it's suction. I mean, at the end of the day, we're putting it, as my then 15-year-old said, you invented a tube. He's not wrong. Like, at the end of the day, there's some things we have to do to enable that, and that's the secret sauce. But that's all published in issued patents and things like that. But at the end of the day, we had to create a fluid column from the renal pelvis through each of the million nephrons to Bowman space, the backside of the filter in the glomerulus. And when you do that, you can't pull a fluid. You can only have force push from an area of higher pressure. So by decreasing the pressure on the backside, you produce filtrate. And now the magic of the kidney comes to life, because now the kidney can selectively reabsorb what it needs to balance that internal environment. The kidney is we're just letting we're getting out of its way and letting it do what it's supposed to do. Because the kidney, you filter 180 liters of blood a day and produce 2 liters of urine. So how does it do that? It spends an enormous amount of energy keeping sodium, keeping glucose, keeping other electrolytes and nutrients, while getting rid of urea and creatinine and all the metabolic byproducts with this concentrated urine. The urine is not the value of the kidney. The value of the kidney is the blood. Because if the kidney's doing its job, the blood isn't in balance.
Yeah, best
It doesn't matter how ugly or clean the urine is, as long as the blood is clean and pristine.
I mean, it's amazing, to be honest. In preparation of this, I was reading, and you just mentioned it, the 180 liters or 50 gallons of blood each day. I mean, that's an amazing amount of liquids, of blood going through the kidneys on a regular basis.
Well, same thing with sodium. I mean, the American diet is probably 4 grams of sodium. It should be 2.
Yeah.
But whatever you eat above the metabolic demands of the body are excreted by the kidneys. It's a very smart system. And so every time you reabsorb sodium back into the bloodstream, that costs energy. And so the medulla of the kidney is operating at near hypoxia under healthy conditions. So now you put into an environment of a patient where they have high blood pressure, they have poor glycemic control, they have low cardiac output or heart failure. Now you've upended the balance of what should be the normal reabsorption, and you've pushed the kidney beyond the point that it can handle. And so now it becomes overtly hypoxic and you start to lose function. And so that every day you're chipping away at it. And then you go in the ICU and you take a massive hit because you're getting treatments, you're ill, there's trauma, whatever. There's a lot of insults that happen to the kidney. And so that's where we're starting, that moment in time where if you can protect the kidney when it's most susceptible, then you don't have those declines over time. And that's
you allow it to perform at the same level even after the acute stress. That's very, very intuitive. And obviously your clinical stage, you have ongoing and completed clinical studies. Would you be able to share some data and maybe some important learnings or data points?
Absolutely. So our first in human was in acute cardiorenal syndrome, acute decompensated heart failure. We literally just published that yesterday. So that data, a small crossover study, 7 patients. We took patients who were not responding, who were in the hospital for acute heart failure, not responding to very high doses of IV diuretics. I think our average was 280 milligrams IV per day. It should be enough Lasix to make a stone pee. We followed those patients for 24 hours, planted our system, treated for 24 hours, explanted and followed for 24 hours. And what we showed was with 7 patients, we had a significant increase in both urine output and sodium excretion. And that sodium excretion is exciting because we didn't see that on the potassium side too. So, we now have an opportunity that the kidney is actually keeping what it needs to keep. We almost hit measured creatinine clearance, but 7 patients wasn't quite enough. We'll definitely see that in future studies. And then we pivoted. I mean, that moment in time of everyone had told us CKD patients will never respond to your therapy. There's too much fibrosis. There's too much going on. They were the ones who responded the best. And so we pivoted and we decided to go after cardiac surgery as our moment in time. When the surgery is, who's at risk, when they're at risk, and you can have almost a secondary prevention approach to try to preserve that function. And in a 10-patient trial in Eastern Europe, 90% of the patients we treated had better renal function on post-op day 2 than they did going into the surgery, which is unheard of. So We're very excited about that. That was the basis of our FDA breakthrough. And now we're executing a pivotal trial, which will be multinational. Again, we don't need huge numbers because the effect size is pretty pronounced. When you solve the right problem, you don't need, I joke, I was at Bristol Myers Squibb when they did a 45,000 patient Plavix trial. If you need 45,000 patients to see an effect, you don't have one. And so we're blessed that we have the opportunity to show a pretty pronounced effect. 123 patients. That study is ongoing.
It's very encouraging as well. And obviously, you've mentioned the breakthrough FDA granted you IDE, I think, last year in December.
Yep.
And you've mentioned obviously the trials. What's the regulatory pathway look like? What milestones are you anticipating in the near future?
So we believe, and we're preparing that we're a de novo pathway. We need a trial because we don't have an indication, that we don't have a, each component of this system has been used in marketed devices, just not for this patient population and for this indication. We want the indication. So at the end of the day, we're going to start with cardiac surgery. And, we're very much, this is oversimplified, but we're very much going after a sustain or enhance kidney function during times of acute stress. So that first trial will be cardiac surgery for patients with renal impairment. And then we'll move from there into other surgical indications and then back to the medical ICU as a way to sort of spread within the institution.
Yeah, and obviously de novo and being first, not having predicate means obviously, first of all, it's benefit to a very high degree, but also you're kind of opening doors and creating an understanding for many of the end users as to what your technology is and what you're developing. And operating at the intersection of cardiac surgery and renal management, how are you approaching market segmentation and early adoption? How do you educate the people involved as to what you're building and what your technology does for the patients?
So we've got our biggest challenge is going to be the multi-stakeholder coordination.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the cardiac surgeon is the one who will make the decision whether or not to use. They need a urologist to put it in. The intensivists will be the ones who actually benefit or not from whether that therapy was played out, because AKI hits it while they're in the ICU. And then the nephrologist needs to be the internal educator, the internal advocate, to show that this is actually good medicine, and open the doors for our second and third product that will be more relevant as a nephrology core play. So that's community-based therapies.
So how do you differentiate then Roivios in a space where kidney injury prevention is typically addressed through systemic or non-device solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking with Professor Zarbach the other day, and the KDIO bundle should be the standard of care. It's very difficult to implement. So that's, at some level, that's the world we're heading into, is that, you have, even when you implement the best bundle for kidney care, you still have a 50% incidence of AKI in high-risk patients. So if we show what we think we're going to show, then it won't be that complicated of a conversation of, do you want to reduce post-surgical complications, reduce post-surgical length of stay? That economically, clinically, that they all line up. This is a very consistent story of everybody benefits if you use this system. It's a little bit of effort on the front end. I'm not going to minimize that.
We'll pay dividends later on. I mean, to be honest, it's always amazing running a MedTech business where you're obviously having a lot of hurdles to go through. So it's not only creating the product; it's then thinking about obviously the end user, thinking about the actual hospital workflows as well, and how do you navigate all of that. It's impressive to watch, and at the same time I admire every single one of you involved in it, because it's challenge after challenge. So it's almost thinking ahead of the game. Okay, I've solved this problem of creating this device, and I'm now going through an amazing clinical study, but then have you thought about reimbursement? How am I going to make some money from it?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we'll do a value-based price approach. Yeah. We think we know what those numbers would be given different results we get from the trial. And ultimately, our goal will be to have the institution benefit from this, have the clinician benefit from this. The insurers are the easy one, because if a patient crashes into dialysis, the payers are on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's the easy part. It's just making sure that the institution and the providers all have a rationale as to why this makes sense for their practice. And in today's world, CMS is implementing a new Teams model starting in 3 weeks. That Teams model will put the institution at risk for post-surgical complications, longer length of stay, readmissions, transitions of care, all of that. So if you improve kidney function during that time of acute stress, you have faster recovery. You have less requirement for all of those events to play out.
So as a CEO of a MedTech startup, you wear many hats, and you're running a marathon, that's for sure. And obviously you do this with a team, and my curiosity is around leadership principles and what have guided you through the long MedTech development cycle.
I'm a big fan of the Table Group. Patrick Lencioni, he's got several books. One is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it, really revolves around a team being focused on the same core objective KPRs fit beautifully within that system as well. And, getting people who want to move the ball forward, who are accountable, who are excited about changing the future just as much as we are. I was fortunate. My first hire, Jacob Upperco, best hire of my career. I mean, seriously, he took my crazy idea and it is converted that into a tangible product that we can actually work on. So we got good people all around us. So it's been a fun journey.
And to be honest, obviously, one of the businesses that I'm involved in is an executive search company, and we always see that the benefit of founders identifying the right profile of people and equipping themselves with everybody that can help them, tell them what to do, rather than the other way around. That's how good quality CEOs lead a company.
Yeah. So
well done on that. And obviously,
rather
I
be
mean,
lucky than good, right?
yes, indeed. So you've mentioned about keeping them motivated during the slow, highly regulated phases. And obviously now I'm thinking, obviously you have some timelines and I'm assuming you're starting to move closer to commercialization. How are you thinking about that? You've mentioned the QMS and the setup on that side. How are you progressing from focusing on clinical to focusing on manufacturing issues and commercialization potentially?
Yeah, so it will be interesting as we move through this transition into the marketplace. We're building a company that can commercialize. We're actually building a company that could go public if that was the right path. Ultimately, I'd rather be in a position to not need that and have it than the other way around. So the commercialization in the US is not that large of a challenge that a startup couldn't take it. I mean, at the end of the day, there are only so many centers of excellence for cardiac surgery to start with.
Yeah.
You don't need an enormous field force. What you need is a field force that's got a mixture of the clinical workflow and then a part of the team that can handle the economic conversation. Because ultimately, that's really what will lead to moving institutions. You can have a great relationship with a surgeon. If you don't have a relationship with a CFO, that could be a problem. Likewise, if you have a great relationship with a CFO and the surgeon doesn't like it, you're not going anywhere. So, you have to sort of make sure you create these opportunities, and then we'll build case studies and show what we can get from deploying this in different types of systems. Because I don't think every system will have the same value proposition. There are some hospitals that are waiting to schedule surgeries until the ICU is clear. For them, a length of stay argument is all about throughput, the restaurant analogy of turning the tables. There are others that have patients who sit in the bed forever, and those are the economic liabilities for the institution. You get a couple outliers that stack up on each other, and now you're starting to really feel the pain on the bottom line. So those are different types of solutions, different types of arguments that need to be brought to bear.
Yeah. So moving on to maybe a future outlook and future vision and industry outlook, let's put it this way. And you've already touched upon it, that the product is currently focusing on cardiac surgery, but you have other goals. And you are seeing the platform obviously being applied in other surgical or critical care settings. Do you mind sharing a little bit more on that?
No, I mean, we have a plan. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. But at the end of the day, we've got different triggers and milestones as to what would suggest that it's ready to add and expand that weight of evidence. Obviously, one study in cardiac surgery is exciting, but ultimately that one study won't change practice. We'll need, collaboration, and we'll need cooperation. We'll need additional evidence. And so that's really what we're planning to build, is moving from the cardiac surgery ICU to the major surgical ICUs, and then move from the major surgical ICUs into the medical ICUs. And that really is the thought process and planning. And timing on that is, obviously challenging to predict. But the sequence, I think, is pretty simple and clear, and how we move from one place to the other. Intensivists are fully aware of the challenges and burdens associated with either AKI or loss of renal function. They are aware of what we're doing, and that part's exciting.
Amazing. And what major trends in perioperative care or renal management excite you over the next decade, above and beyond, obviously, Roivios and the results that you're producing at the moment?
Well, I think kidney is finally getting the attention that it deserves. Coming into this, again, I thought dialysis was the big problem, and it's really just the tip of the iceberg. So the fact that the national payers and clinicians and societies are all starting to recognize that there's a group of 16 million Americans that are in the hospital 14 million times a year.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to die before they qualify for dialysis than they are to live long enough to qualify for dialysis. So the kidneys aren't failed, but the rest of the body failed because the kidneys didn't keep up with it. That's really the exciting part, is getting the recognition that this is the opportunity. If you want to bend the cost curve in US healthcare, this is a major lever that could be applied. And if you can keep that group, it's not just keeping them out of the hospital. There are many value-based care organizations, the Strives, Monogram Health, Somatises of the world. They've literally raised over $1 billion in their care coordination plans. And their objective is to reduce hospital admissions, which is important. But if you don't reduce the outliers, you're never going to bend the curve, because they're the ones who are generating those. What I think it's 12% of hospital admissions within CKD generate 40 to 45% of the cost. So if you don't affect that small group, you're not bending the curve on cost. There's a glass ceiling that's pretty low for those cost improvement mechanisms. And our opportunity is that we'll be able to collaborate with them. We'll be able to identify who is the highest risk for an admission, and then the ones that you can't rescue, the ones who end up in the hospital, that you can rescue them in the hospital and keep them from becoming an outlier. And that's really where you get the exciting synergy between these two types of approaches, not only from a cost perspective, but from a life-changing perspective. To keep somebody at a CKD 3 instead of having them go to a 4 or dialysis or die. I mean, that's the game we're playing.
And to be honest, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, dialysis means basically you have your death certificate already written. It is just a longer process to get there.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've done a lot of voice of the customer over the years for everything from the common cold to heroin addiction. The voice of the customer from folks who were in dialysis clinics was the most powerful I've ever experienced. So I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
It keeps them alive. But I do think the numbers are staggering. The numbers of people who are willing to say, I'm done. They know the consequence, but this isn't worth it anymore. That sort of gives you a perspective of what that world's like. So we need to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And you've already kind of half answered the question, but I would ask it anyway. If we fast forward 5 years, what would success look like for Roivios?
Success in 5 years, we would be reaching our goals of penetration within the cardiac surgery space and in the surgical space, and we would be starting to gain traction in sepsis. That's what success would look like, to show that. And now we've got the full bookend. We know it's not just surgery, it's not just heart failure, but to show that we can actually sustain kidneys during sepsis. That's what good looks like for Roivios.
And that's an amazing, appealing diversification and platform technology, which nowadays obviously investors are very much keen to see. So it's good to understand that obviously you have a much bigger oversight and ambition above and beyond just the cardiac surgery.
Well, that's just juxtaflow. I mean, ultimately, our crazy goal is the pacemaker for the kidney, fully implanted system. You've been in the hospital a couple of times. The scenario would play out. The reason you're in the hospital is your kidneys aren't doing their job. Let's give you this technology to keep your kidneys going so that you don't keep coming back to the hospital. You don't keep progressing, and you can enjoy your quality of life before it goes away.
That's a very, very good. Yeah. So that's, I'm assuming, the 10-year goal then.
Hopefully.
Awesome. As we are wrapping up, maybe a little bit of an advice from your own experience and success that you've had so far that you can give to other MedTech founders that are in a much earlier stage, but still working on first-in-class technologies.
So my advice would be to pressure test everything as soon as you can. There is no advantage of waiting until submission to the FDA of wondering whether or not, and it's unfortunate, but the V-Wave case sort of plays that out. Like, you need to make sure you have everything lined up before you submit so that it's not a question coming out there, because this is an expensive, time-consuming journey. So the sooner you make sure you understand you're on the right path, or at least close to the right path, the better. It doesn't get easier as time goes on.
That's a very, very sound advice. Thank you for that. And as a last question, and maybe a takeaway from this, what is one key message that you want listeners, especially, let's say, clinicians, hospital leaders, and investors, to take away from this conversation?
I think the one message that I would love for the audience to understand and appreciate, we talk about cardiovascular disease, you talk about oncology as the two big markets. Kidney failure really is bigger than both of those combined. And at the end of the day, kidney failure is rarely the primary cause of death. It's the ninth leading cause of death. But in a cardiac surgery context, in a major surgery context, it's the hidden trigger that in over 50% of cases was the first domino to fall. And that's really the key thing I want to drag out, is that this is the tipping point. This is the moment when things start to go sideways. And so if we can solve that, the dominoes don't move.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Your video feed is breaking up a little bit, so that's why I'm a bit puzzled. But I'm
Do you want me to do
confident
another
that
one of
once
those?
it's uploaded, everything will be fine.
Do you want me
No,
to do
I'm
one more?
definitely confident that it uploads from your side, so it's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm definitely rooting for Roivios and everything that you're doing.
No, thank you. I appreciate you taking the little guy and giving him a stage. So thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome.
Have a great day.